Not again. Not again. Not again. Well then, Mr. Natsume. It would appear you're going to have to accompany me down to the yard. Again. But wait. Hold your horses. Yes? Door, key, locked, entry, exit, entirely impossible. He's so flustered he's been even stranger than normal. What? You think that's an alibi? You could have just made a copy. What? You live in the same building after all. You could have had, you'd have had plenty of opportunity, I'm sure. But misery be. Sorry, sir. You'll get your chance to give your side of the story later. The facts speak for themselves, Mr. Mustache. You horrible Herlack Sholmes. He really has found himself in an arch rival now, hasn't he? Come on now, no dilly-dallying. Outside, there's a carriage waiting. Welcome, student, Mr. Naruhodo Esquire. I never imagined I'd be in this position again, but you have to help me, please, please. I'm innocent. All right, I understand. We'll come to your cell later and talk about it. And one more thing. Oh, yes. My poor little kitty cat. Please give him his breakfast for me. And so, his evil curse still apparently unbroken, Soseki found himself once again the prime suspect in a case of murder. Thanks to the incriminating deduction of the great detective. My dear fellow, that honor belongs to you. Well, at least that means Inspector Gregson is no longer here. We can examine the crime scene in more detail now. You'd think he'd leave somebody, be like, hey yo, make sure they don't touch anything. Yes, that's right. I guess the coroner was supposed to be there, right? Like he's on his way. And of course, what? Have you forgotten what the inspector mentioned before? It was the landlord, Mr. Garadeb, who discovered Mr. Shamspear. Oh, Mr. John Garadeb. Yes. I expect we could find him in his sitting room on the top floor as usual. Right, we must remember to go and talk to him later then. As we've seen from the outside, the window is completely bricked up. A vestige of the former window tax that Britons... How are you supposed to... Britons had to pay? What strange things they used to tax in Great Britain. I mean, making people pay for the number of windows they had in a property? It's extraordinary. It's heartbreaking to think of the poor having to block up their windows just to avoid an unaffordable tax. Oh, what is it, Miss Susato? If you look closely, a number of bricks are loose. Oh yes, it looks as though an amateur has broken out of them a few times broken out a few of them just here. Was it Mr. Shamspear who did it, I wonder? Being the lodger renting this room. Oh, look at this, Mr. Naruhodo. On the outside, there's a little ledge. And there's something on it. What? Outside? Oh, do we go outside? Oh my goodness, that's a lot of places. Oh, here it is, right? With the exception of the top floor where Mr. and Mrs. Garadeb live, all the windows are bricked up. Yes, that's because of an old window tax that was charged on the number of windows a property had. In order to pay less tax, the poorer members of society filled in many of their windows. But the tax has since been abolished, hasn't it? So the windows could all be opened up again, surely. Unfortunately, it would appear that the residents of this district can't afford to pay to have their work done. Yes, that is a sad state of affairs. Especially for people like poor Mr. Natsume who have to live all cooped up in a windowless room. I suppose that's the price you pay for living in a very cheap accommodation. It all seems rather pointless when you put it like that. Oh, but there's the soap. Or whatever this is. What is this? Okay, apparently it's nothing. Oh. And here we have another disproportionately large machine. This looks like a meter of some kind. This is a gas meter, I think. It seems that in this district, residents pay for gas as they use it with what? Residents pay for gas as they use it with coins. Oh, I see. Yes, now that you pointed it out, I can see that there's a slot just here that looks like it could take a coin. So you mean if you put a coin in here... That's right. That would buy you about 2 hours of gas for lights and heating. So if you were a poor person with no money, you'd have to sleep in the freezing cold? Yes, or if you were a scatterbrain with no change because you forgot to exchange your money at the bank. Thank goodness there's no meter in our office. Didn't I say that there was like a gas leak and it was like making everyone crazy or like killing people? This is a gas wall light, isn't it? It must be connected to a gas pipe in the wall. Gas lights. A gas stove. London really is a city of gas. But now that I think about it, Mr. and Mrs. Garrett have had an open fire on the top floor, didn't they? Oh yes, you're right. I don't recall seeing a gas stove up there. Well, I much prefer a real fire anyway. So much cozier. Okay, but did we check what's in this hole? Oh, it's so cold outside. You can feel it through this gap. It did snow all last night. It would be cold. More importantly, what is on the ledge out there? What are those snow-covered lumps? It's more bars of soap. Soap? What are bars of soap doing lined up on a ledge outside the window? I have no idea, but the pair of them look rather charming like that. Still, it's very strange, isn't it? Bars of soap lined up outside the window? I think perhaps we should take one. There are two, after all. Oh dear, I suppose we could. Oh, what's this? Look here at this soap. Oh. Do you see in the middle there? There's a patch that's a different color. It's sort of transparent, but some sort of fancy design, I suppose. Only in Great Britain. Looks like the Hinomaru flag of Japan, doesn't it? How wonderful. It's probably a very expensive brand. Expensive? Then what's it doing in this ramshackle old room? Can we examine the soap? This part is a different color. It's an exquisite design, isn't it? Trust the British to turn a boring bar of soap into something special. I quite like it. It reminds me of the Hinomaru design of the Japanese flag. I expect this is rather expensive soap. That doesn't seem likely given who it belongs to. Okay. It's like an indent, so maybe something melted into this soap? Whatever, it'll become important later. Look at these extravagant bright costumes. Somehow they look out of place in this room with its grim, shady goings-on. This one looks like a king's attire. A king? I've always dreamt about being a king. Oh, I think you'd be more suited to a feudal lord. A daimyo or such like. With a chonmage top knot? Every Japanese man wishes he had a chonmage. Oh, you look wonderful with one, and you already have the sword. Can you imagine what would happen if I walked around the streets of London with a chonmage and a sword? Well, technically, he's already walking around with a sword. There's not much on these shelves, is there? It's just a wine glass and a bottle. Both of them are cracked. Yes, not much use, are they? What's the matter? Oh, I was just reminded of the Reaper, that's all. Prosecutor Lord Van Zykes? Yes, he's so reckless with his wine glasses. I was thinking it's a waste that he should donate some to the needy. You can suggest it next time we meet. Oh, the poor man. So young to die. Do you suppose it was a very painful death being poisoned as he was? I don't know. All we can do now is hope that he'll be reborn to a better life. Yes, I suppose you're right. I wonder. Do you think that putting our hands together in a Japanese prayer will help a British soul? Sorry? I made sure I had a reference at the ready for just such an occasion as this, actually. This book is entitled The Beginner's Guide to Praying for the Departed, the British Way. I'll just reread it now. One moment. There's quite a spine on that book, isn't there? He doesn't have anything else? I mean, there's like more to the room, but I thought... Oh, what is this? What's this? It looks like part of an envelope, I think. Yes, I think you may be right. Perhaps it was torn off when the letter was opened. Is that significant? Well, it's a little out of place, perhaps. When you look around the room, there's no sign of a letter, or the rest of the envelope, in fact, is there? Oh, she's right. And yet, here we have the torn end of an envelope. It just strikes me as unusual. I agree. We better take this, just in case. Okay. Okay, anything else? Also, do you call it envelope or envelope? I forgot how to go. This is some sort of makeshift stage, I think, isn't it? Where does the audience sit, though, for the nightly Shakespeare performances? Actors aspiring to the great stage must practice their art, Mr. Naruhodo, with or without an audience. In fact, on a related note, perhaps you should set up a mock bench for the defense in your office. What? Then you could practice your art every single day. I'll think about it, if you promise to don a beard and play the role of the judge. Well, if that would help you achieve your goal. This I have to see. Maybe we got all the clues? There's this down here, but I don't know. I think that's his hat. We saw him one time, and I think he was wearing a hat. Okay, I think we're done here. Usually you get like a scene or something being like, oh, okay, finished. Maybe we have to come back here eventually, so... Because we have like a couple places we can go to. Should we tell Iris? Oh, hello, ma'am. Iris? That's incredible concentration, that is. I find it quite remarkable how she can focus on so many different things at once. Perhaps I should try drinking more herbal tea. The blend third from the right would be good for you, Runo. Oh, Iris? This girl is destined for great things, I'm sure. There always seems to be a bicycle outside the Gyaradev residence. I read that bicycles are extremely popular all over Great Britain at the moment, in fact. That one seems very warped, though, especially the front. Is that to make it more of a challenge to ride, do you think? No, I'm afraid that may be a result of the rider's incompetence. For the front wheel to be so badly warped, I'm afraid the rider may have been similarly afflicted. Then there's a good chance Mr. Natsume has been practicing on this bicycle, I think. Oh dear, I fear you may be right. Well, yeah, we can go to their house, right? Here we are again, the eccentric landlord's eccentric top floor abode. We're here because Mr. Gyaradove's the one who discovered the incident this morning, don't forget. Ah, you chaps, eh? Yes, good morning, sir. Thank you for your cooperation in court yesterday. It was quite a trial. As much for Mr. Gyaradev as anyone, really. Came straight back here after all that business at the Bailey yesterday. Didn't expect to wake up to more bally nonsense this morning. I wonder if you wouldn't mind telling us exactly what happened, Mr. Gyaradev. Yes, I suppose you'd like to know all about that dead loss of an actor chap on the ground floor room. Those were exactly Inspector Gregson's words, weren't they? It must have been a real shock for you this morning. I hear that you discovered what happened. Well, that hopeless actor chap rises at 5 o'clock sharp every morning, without fail. But at 5:30 this morning, he still hadn't lit the gas. So I went down and knocked on his door, but no bally answer. And that's when you broke into his room by kicking down the door? Well, I called on that rum-looking Japanese chap to do the grunt work, of course. Wasn't it a little premature to kick the door down? The man could have just overslept by half an hour. That's very true, Mr. Naruhodo. If 30 minutes oversleeping warranted such behavior, I'd have to kick your door down every morning. Well, you know, better to be safe than sorry and all that. Is it just me, or is he avoiding our gaze now all of a sudden? Except that it was a sorry situation indeed that you found on the far side of the room. Or the door. The victim's name is Mr. Shamspear, I believe. Is that right? Yes, William Shamspear. Took the ground floor room 3 months ago now. And how would you describe him? In a word, destitute. Destitute? Well, let's face it, the only redeeming feature of that room is the cheap rent. Anyone wanting to live in a place like that is either broke or has a badly screw loose. So hard to choose which category Soseki would fall into. Mr. Naruhodo, that's a little rude. He was doing research as well. Research? Into what? Shakespeare, of course. Shakespeare! Read a few plays of the old bard myself, you know, Romeo and Hamlet and all that. Yes, William Shakespeare is England's most highly regarded classical playwright and author. He's known as Sao in Japanese, as you know, and many of his works have already been translated. Seems incredible that Shakespeare was shortened to Sao, though. Someone was too heavy-handed there. There were a lot of costumes in the victim's room, actually, weren't there? Of course, Mr. Natsume is a scholar of English literature as well. I imagine he and Mr. Shamspear would have had much in common. Shakespeare interpretation disagreement leads to shocking murder. Let's hope it's not that. Mr. Naruhodo, really, how rude. After Mr. Natsume's trial yesterday, you came straight back here, I believe, didn't you? Did you notice anything strange between the... Oh, probably them. Like... Oh, wait, between then and this morning. That also makes sense. Both of them make sense. Well, now, must have been about 6 in the evening by the time I got home. Snow was coming down rather heavily as I remember, and it was completely dark already. That failed actor chap was out at the time. Mr. Gardev noticed there was no light from his room or something, I suppose. Couldn't summon the energy for anything much, so I just sat in front of the fire up here. It was after 8 before Shamspear got back, and the chap was up until past 1 in the morning, I'll have you know. Suppose he met his end sometime after that. I was asleep by then, so I'm rather in the dark there. Well, thank you. That was very illuminating. Is everything alright, Miss Usato? Well, I was just thinking it's a little strange, that's all. Mr. Gardev, you were up here in your room all evening, if I've understood correctly. Not a big fan of stairs, not with this blasted leg. Then, how is it that you seem to know the precise movements of your tenants on the ground floor? That's a very good point. I can't imagine that you could hear noises from the ground floor all the way up here. Does this old man like to spy on his tenants? Is that it? I say, I know what you're thinking, and it's a badly outrage. I'm ex-military, don't you know? I don't go around spying on my tenants. Why would I? Then how did you know, Mr. Gardev? It's the gas, woman. The gas tells me everything. The gas? What on earth do you mean, sir? How can the gas tell you anything, let alone everything? Well, as you're probably aware, the gas is applied to the building by pipes. Yes, I'd more or less worked that out. Every room in the building is connected by a single pipe to the gas main outside, and the gas company supplies gas to properties via the main. Yes, I understand that too. Let me see if I can explain. Let's say I was to light the gas lamps up here. What do you suppose would happen? Well, obviously the room would get brighter. Exactly, but at the same time, the lights in all the other rooms of the house would dim for a moment. What? They dim? Why? Perhaps it's because when you light a gas lamp, it briefly uses more gas than usual, and that reduces the amount of gas in the pipe for the other lamps that are connected to it. That might explain why the other lamps dim momentarily, mightn't it? Yes, of course, because everything's connected to a single supply pipe. Is that supposed to happen, though? Sounds rather undesirable. Jolly good point. Fact is, the gas company's pipes in these parts are pretty hopeless, long worn out, and barely got any gas in them to start with. Opposite's also true, of course. Extinguish the lamps up here and they glow brighter in the rest of the house. Alright, I see. So by watching the flickering of the lamps in one room, you can determine what's happening elsewhere. You've got it. Oh, of course, because when people come back home in the evening, and before they go to sleep at night, what they're guaranteed to do is either light or put out their lamps and fires. Clever. In point of fact, the room on the ground floor and the one above it use slightly different amounts of gas. By watching the lights in here closely, I can work out almost exactly what's going on in the whole house. Gosh, that's fascinating, Mr. Garadeb. Oh, well, nothing to it, really. And I can't really see that it's going to help us with the case either. What I'd like to know is why Mr. Garadeb is so interested in what his tenants are up to in the first place. I feel like there's more to it than idle curiosity. Whoever opened this envelope didn't bother with a letter opener or scissors, did they? Yes, whoever opened it was clearly someone with an unrefined temperament, and judging from the angle of the rip here, the person in question must have been right-handed. Miss Susato, I think perhaps someone's been reading too much of the adventures of Sherlock Holmes. You can never read too much of it, Mr. Naruhodo. Never! I forgot to look at this teacup. Oh, one of the teacups that Mr. Shamspear and his guests drank from last night. But don't go drinking from them, Mr. Naruhodo. There's bitter poison inside. I'm not planning on drinking any, don't worry. Anyway, the cups are both empty. That's true. So, one was Mr. Shamspear's, and the other must be the cup that Mr. Natsume was drinking from. But Soseki wasn't poisoned, of course. Perhaps we should take these so we can examine them in more detail later. Okay, there you go. Oh, that's all I was busy, the damn teacup. Looks like you're having a good snoop around, eh? Inspector Gregson, back so soon? After I threw that little Japanese fella in the clink, I went and reported this to the investigation division. In 5 minutes' time, this place will be cordoned off by the yard. Oh, I see. Well, we better be leaving then. Poor Mr. Natsume must be feeling very low being back in a cell again so soon. I'm sure. We should probably go and... Oh my... What the fuck? What's wrong? Ugh. Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. Now, how soundeth the next part? It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Indeed. Oh, happy day. What the fuck? Wow. Walking Dead. The fella isn't dead at all? What was that nonsense he was saying, though? I think, yes, it was from William Shakespeare's Macbeth. A soliloquy from Act 5, Scene 5. Shakespeare. So it was that the victim, Mr. William Shakespeare, came back to life. If the man had indeed been poisoned, it transpired that it hadn't killed him. He was taken by emergency carriage to a nearby hospital for treatment, and Inspector Gregson evicted us from the scene of the crime. Whatever that was. Whatever that now was. Oh, who the fuck is this? Whatever do you think will happen now? Good question. What a strange situation for Mr. Natsume, arrested for murder, but then the victim comes back to life. I think perhaps the victim was never dead in the first place. It seems very likely that Mr. Shakespeare did consume poison, as we deduced, but it was an accident, attempted suicide, or attempted... Oh, but was it an accident, attempted suicide, or attempted murder? Until the truth can be established, I imagine the police will keep Mr. Natsume in custody. I suppose so. Let's hope it doesn't come to anything more than a night in the cells. Oh, what's this? What's that man doing over there? It looks like he's trying to see into Soseki's lodgings. Is something wrong? Excuse me, could we have a word? Huh? He just ran off. I feel sure that I've seen that man somewhere before. Where was it? I do too, but I don't remember. Well, we've done as much investigating here as we can, I think. Perhaps we ought to go to the prison and speak with Mr. Natsume again. Good idea. Okay, there you go. All I had to do was look at a teacup. Look, Mr. Naruhodo. Mr. Natsume, have the police finished questioning you now? Lockup student, Mr. Naruhodo Esquire. Oh, yes? Where is he? Tell me. Is he a ghost? Is he here to harm me? Let me guess. You're talking about Mr. Sholmes? He actually calls himself a great detective, Mr. Natsume, not a ghost. But his diabolic deductions, they're not of this world. They've left me... Oh, cursed. I'm cursed, I tell you. Well, that sort of hurts. Credit where credit is due, Mr. Naruhodo. You were heavily involved in the deduction, too. Yes, moving on. We have some wonderful news. Oh, the victim that we all thought was dead has come back to life again. Now, in the absolutely worst case, you could only be tried for attempted murder. That's great, isn't it, Mr. Natsume? It's terrible. Oh. I'm stuck in this cell, suffering for some silly wrong end of the stick. You did it, didn't you? Confess, you're a killer. Why the mustache? Constant questions. I'm sorry to hear that. Oh, that selfish shyster. Make up your mind. Are you dead or alive? If you were going to come back to life, why bother dying? Wickedly wishy-washy will you... Well, it seems likely that Mr. Shakespeare was never actually dead in the first place. Oh, yes, that might make sense. And I'm pleased that he's alive, of course. Our lively debate last night was much fun. It'd be sad to think it was our last. Oh, oops. Mr. Natsume, does this mean that you did see the victim last night? You met with Mr. Shakespeare, didn't you? I'm not saying another word. I demand to have a lawyer present. Who do you think I am? Please, Mr. Natsume, we need to hear your side of the story. Why am I cursed like this? Can you tell us exactly what happened last night then, Mr. Natsume? There's nothing to tell. But, Mr. Naruhodo Esquire, I'm eternally grateful to you for helping me with that accursed case yesterday. The case of that poor woman Miss Green hospitalized. Oh, that saw poor Miss Green hospitalized after she ended up with a knife in her back. It's hard to believe that was only yesterday. After the trial was over, I trudged my weary way back to my lowly lodgings, and that evening at past 9, it must have been, I visited Mr. Shakespeare. So you did go to the victim's room then. As we feared. I didn't do anything wrong. I'd never been to his room before. It was the first time. Then what made you decide to go? I bumped into him when I arrived back at the house. We got chatting and it developed into a discussion, but he had to go out, so I bade him farewell. That ties in with what Mr. Garrett said, that the victim went out and came back after 8. We met again later that evening at around 9 or just after, when I took him some nice tea I'd brewed as a gift. So it was you who brought the tea that had clearly been drunk at the scene then. And I suppose you were discussing the works of Shakespeare, were you? Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. Romeo and Juliet, who was the stronger? It was a delightful debate. I'm sure. Such a stimulating subject, Shakespeare. And the debate became very heated, so you slipped poison into Mr. Shakespeare's tea? No, never, not at all. Team Juliet won. That was me. And when I left his room, the flamboyant fellow was fighting fit. I swear it, categorically. Mr. Natsume, you often say the same thing about yourself, I've noticed, that you have a cursed existence. I'm sure I've mentioned this to you before, but I've been here in Great Britain for a year now, and in that time, I've learned that it's no place for me. It can be very trying to live in a foreign land and adapt to the ways of another culture. There are foreigners everywhere I look, and they all stare at me. They all laugh. That's the impression I get whenever I go out. It makes me scared to leave my room. Which is why I've become a recluse. But even in my room, I find no respite from my fears. I've moved more times than I can remember, and then 1 week ago, I moved into Briar Road. But why? I mean, why did you choose that place? It doesn't seem very comfortable. Because the rent is cheap. I have so little money, it spoke to me. Rent? Obviously, there's a reason why it's cheap. Because the room is cursed. Cursed? Cursed how? The previous occupant, the man who lived there before I took the room, died there. Oh no. He was only a young man, but one morning he was found dead and no one could explain why. Surely no one would want to live in a room with a history like that. I didn't. When the letting agent recommended the place, I wavered. But I want books, and books cost money. A horrible history is a small price to pay. When I realized it would mean I could buy more books, I signed the lease like lightning. Brave or blinkered. But after I moved in, I soon came to realize what I'd done. I realized how horrible that room's history really was. Gosh, was it really so awful? How did the room's horrible history affect you, Mr. Natsume? What happened? At first, it was just a feeling. The feeling of beady eyes boring into my back, watching me. Do you think that might just have been your mind playing tricks on you? No. My mind doesn't know any tricks. It was someone else. It's been one long nightmare ever since I was given the keys to this place. A nightmare? You've been having bad dreams, you mean? All the souls who've died in that room lean over me in my sleep and try to strangle me. That really is horrible. And now I come to think of it, it happened again last night too. The very same night that Mr. Shamspear was writhing in agony from the poison in his body. I was on the verge of being suffocated silently by those miserable spirits in my room. You simply must move out of that room as soon as possible. Yes, you're right, I know it, and that's why I'm already searching for the next room with a history to call home. I think perhaps you should try to avoid accommodation with any kind of history at all. Otherwise, I'm scared that you yourself may become history. Oh, Susato knows how to make the man listen. Of course, Mr. Lord of the Manor is worried about the curse on my room as well. You mean Mr. Garrideb? Yes, he knows that if people keep dying there, he'll never be able to rent it out again. Well, that's true. I, for one, wouldn't go near the place. Perhaps that may explain why the landlord pays so much attention to the gas lamps and his tenants' movements. You mean because he's worried about their well-being? He does seem to have an unusually keen interest in the amount of gas in the pipes. There must be a reason why he keeps such close tabs on the occupants of his rooms. What do you mean he pays so much attention to the gas lamps? Oh dear, no, it's nothing to do with you, Mr. Natsume. Please forget I said anything. Oh, now you're talking about me behind my back as well. What's important is that Mr. Shamspear isn't in fact dead at all. Once he's come around and he's able to tell us what happened, we'll be able to get you released. Yes, please. Oh, I do hope you're right. Ahem, excuse me. Inspector Gregson, I couldn't help overhearing what you just said, and on that note, I have some good news and some bad news. Oh, which do you want first? Always, every time, the bad news comes first. When hope is all you have, hold on to it. That's my guiding principle. Right, well, in that case, the good news it is. Huh? Sorry, but it's just a lot easier to explain everything that way. Then why did you ask me my preference? As you might have heard, the victim, Mr. Shamspear, was just unconscious. He's come around now. Yes, we saw it happen in all its terrifying glory. He's still being treated by the doctors, but we managed to get a written statement from him already. Oh, isn't that wonderful, Mr. Natsume? Oh, thank goodness, it's all over then. I can leave this somber cell. Sorry, no, that's not on the cards. What? Why ever not, Inspector? Mr. Shamspear has implicated someone as being responsible for what happened last night. Implicated someone? Oh dear. You don't mean... I'm sorry to say I do, yes. He's pointed the finger at you, Mr. Natsume. Oh. By sweet poison did he seeketh to end my life. That wickedest whatever, Soseki Natsume. No. So I'm afraid you'll be appearing in court as planned. You'll be wanting to make the necessary preparations. No. And so, once again, Soseki found himself having to take the dock in the Old Bailey. Whether his room was haunted or whether he was just terribly unlucky, I knew I had no choice. The following day, I would represent him in court and do my utmost to break the curse that blighted him. You know what? This one seems to be going fast. I mean, maybe, I don't think... Was there one that we had to, like, stop? Because, like, I know the old games, you have to... They had you stop, like, after you found something out. And then they're like, oh, we'll take a break today and, and proceed tomorrow. And then you got to do more investigating. Have we done that? Like, I feel like we just do all the investigating. And then the court thing happens. And then that's it. Maybe that's why this feels kind of shorter than the other games, than the older games.